What class in fantasy exists just because the non-magic users got sick of the wizard being the only one who could spam fireball every round? The answer is Gunslingers. Gunslingers pride themselves on being masters of their weapons, but they're more gatekeepers and gurus in many fantasy settings. Wizards have entire colleges dedicated to teaching others how to cast spells, and the local church is always looking to recruit more people to become clerics to their god. However, gunslingers don't want it to be common knowledge how to quickly reload and unjam a gun, because then every archer with a good eye could have their job by the end of the week. In order for a gunslinger to feel truly special, they'll need to over-engineer their own one-of-a-kind firearm that falls apart the moment anyone else happens to even touch it. Bonus points if the materials required to make their ammunition can only be found in some specific part of the world that they just happen to stumble upon in their travels. The more complex the design and the more convoluted the gunpowder source, the longer the monologue that the gunslinger gets to make about it. Don't get me wrong, it is impressive you have single-handedly advanced warfare thousands of years into the future with your new shiny firearm. I just don't understand how a random low-level adventurer managed to pull it off while the largest military force in your fantasy setting is still shooting arrows. Gunslingers will tell you over and over again how their gun is the perfect ranged weapon, and then get mad at you if you point out that it misfired twice in the previous encounter. The perfect weapon for most is something that is dangerous even in the hands of a random peasant or your local town guard. For example, a crossbow is the perfect ranged weapon to many, because it allows those not skilled in archery at all to achieve a similar level of lethality with half the effort. The gunslinger should honestly be thankful for the time being that they're the only ones proficient enough to quickly unjam and restore their faulty firearms. If for some reason in your campaign setting guns are common, easy to maintain, and never misfire, then everyone in the party is going to want to have one. Gunslingers are only a novelty when guns are a rarity. There is a reason you have the fighter class and not someone named Swordswinger. You actually have to be talented at a few things beyond your weapon, because being proficient at a weapon is hardly a class-worthy feature. Gunslingers regularly have some kind of mechanic to showcase their grit. This may make gunslingers the only class to be actively rewarded for being as reckless and murderous as possible. The beauty of gunslingers having grit is that you take someone who has a ranged weapon that is constantly at the risk of breaking, and you throw that person into close quarters combat in order to feed their apparent unyielding bloodlust. Most people understand why the barbarian wants to jump into the front line of combat. It's because they have anger issues and a lot of health. Are all gunslingers just edgy engineers that feel like no one really understands them or their super unique and special weapon? At what point does it stop being grit points and starts being angst points? Maybe the first person to be a gunslinger was a reckless murder hobo and everyone that followed just assumed that was part of the gig, because otherwise the whole gunslinger thing is just making a tube explode over and over again without magic until it shreds your enemies into pieces. Not really something that requires an up-close and personal touch. Gunslingers don't actually get any better at shooting their gun when they gain abilities. They instead gain the ability to realize that they can shoot at more locations than just the enemy's head. Did you want your enemy to drop their sword? Good news, the gunslinger just realized that if you shoot the enemy in their hand, they might drop that sword. Is there some kind of projectile coming towards the party? The gunslinger just realized that they can shoot those objects to deflect them away. For someone who had to engineer their own weapon from scratch in their campaign setting, it is rather concerning how little they know about their own weapon and about physics in general. You're telling me that a gunslinger can understand how to fix a jammed weapon and reload it within seconds, but it takes them entire levels to figure out how to do more than one trick shot at a time? If I'm being generous, maybe each ability requires a new special bullet or weapon upgrade to achieve that trick shot, but at what point does the gunslinger matter less than the gun itself? Gunslingers act like their guns are magic, but they are not, regardless of what the random peasants in your otherwise vaguely medieval European campaign settings say. Their gun is just supposed to be a weapon, but instead of treating it like one, the Gunslingers decided that they're going to make it their entire personality. It isn't what the Gunslinger wants anymore, but instead how the Gunslinger can better be a tool for the gun. The party will constantly have to hear about upgrades that have been made to the gun, or new bullets that need to be made for the gun. Maintaining your gear is important as an adventurer, but how often do you hear the barbarian talking about sharpening their battle axe at great length? If they talked about it too much, you'd assume that this is a cursed weapon that is whispering to them for more blood. If the cleric kept talking about polishing their holy symbol over and over again, you'd think that they're having a crisis of faith. But for some reason, if the Gunslinger talks about taking apart and cleaning their weapon a dozen times over the course of the party making camp, I don't actually think anyone at the table would question it. Everyone knows that the gun is in charge and the Gunslinger is just there to pull the trigger. Gunslingers absolutely hate when you ask them why they're a better fit for the adventuring party than just your standard archer. Most parties prefer the things an archer could offer, such as stealthy takedowns, consistent damage, and the ability to easily replenish their ammunition. Can you really blame them for not wanting to have someone whose weapon is loud enough to alert the entire town, is bound to jam at any moment, and whose ammunition is so hard to make it will require an entire side quest just to gather more materials for their bullets? As much as it is cool that you have someone in the party that is able to wield a weapon that shoots flames that rival the wizard's fireballs, I feel like the party would much rather just have a fighter fire a couple of arrows a turn until the enemy is eliminated. I could have said ranger there, but I'm trying to use an example where the reliable range damage dealer is actually a threat. But to be fair to rangers, they are still less of a liability compared to gunslingers, because they'll only send in their animal companion into harm's way and not themselves for those sweet grit points. Gunslingers, for some reason, believe they are charisma-based casters. They aren't in any system that I'm aware of, but that won't stop the Gunslinger in your party from raising their weapon anytime diplomacy happens at the game table. Why let someone more appropriate like the Bard communicate with the NPC in question when you can just point the barrel of your gun right in their face and then start rolling intimidation checks? No, you don't get advantage on that roll, and now the NPC has drawn their weapon. This negotiation is over, and it's time for a standoff. You can't just go around pointing your weapon at people and then get surprised when they try to either run away or attack you before you pull the trigger. If I see a paladin imbuing their weapon in holy light and loudly shouting, I'm fully expecting to get smited. The Gunslinger better hope that this standoff doesn't last more than a few minutes, because you never know when their weapon may misfire for the third time today and alert every person in a mile radius that negotiations have gone south. So yeah, Gunslingers. They don't seem to blend into your standard fantasy setting, but that's just because they want the world to know that they are brooding geniuses whose skill set is well ahead of their time. When you're an adventuring party made of people who are paid to kill things for a living, you can't really be surprised when you get someone that tags along just to field test their latest and greatest murder stick. Just be happy that the barbarian finally has someone crazy enough to jump in after them when combat begins. And as much as I've laid into the impracticality of a firearm in a fantasy setting, I won't lie, it is objectively cooler to fire off bullets at a dragon over hitting them with a dozen arrows. I want an adventurer who strikes fear into the hearts of our enemies, and when it comes to ranged options, there isn't going to be anyone more frightening than the guy who shreds literal monsters to pieces with ease, using something that they slap together with nothing more than a box of scraps and a little bit of grit. That is why Gunslingers are fantasy's most over-engineered edgelords. If you liked the video, make sure to check out my other releases on the channel and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, you can use code LootGoblin at dnddice.com and get free shipping for purchases over $50, as well as free mystery dice sets when you place bigger orders. Be sure to check out the Wild West 11-piece dice set. They have the perfect dice for the Gunslinger in your life, and check out all the other King of Crits exclusive designs. If you want more class-themed dice sets, I'm a big fan of both the One Punch Monk and Ranger Danger dice sets. I hope to see you in the next video. Farewell for now.